I want to give a little bit of a talk here. I find stories are best divided into 3 parts. So I want to talk about where I came from, where we're at in this moment as a Libertarian Party, and where we can go into the 2024 election. So if you've never met me before, my name is Chase. I am a Libertarian candidate for president. I'm from the great state of Georgia. I live in Atlanta, where I've lived since 2009. And I came to the Liberty movement in a way many did. Outside, I came from the 2-party system in the Libertarian Party. Here's where my journey began. 9/11 happened when I was in high school, and the world changed. It was a world-changing moment for each and every person who lived through it. And the war in Afghanistan began, and shortly thereafter the war in Iraq began. And I helped a friend of mine graduate high school. He was not the best at economics and political systems. Lo and behold, I was a political junkie, go figure. And so I helped this guy study, and helped him get through midterms, helped him graduate. And in his yearbook, or my yearbook rather, he signed it with, "Hey, make sure to be looking out for me representing Brookwood High School in Gwinnett County, Georgia, out in Iraq when I'm on TV next year." And in my mind, I thought to myself, maybe I should have let him fail that class and spend another year in school to think about this. Because I did not want to see my good friend being sent over to the war in Iraq. And I had many friends who were sent over there. They have all come back, thank God. But I had many classmates sent over there, and they did come back, many of them with injuries, both seen and unseen. They've had to deal with that stuff. But lo and behold, because of that war, I became an anti-war activist. That's my political start, was getting out on the ground, opposing the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and wanting to bring our troops home and ending the war on terror, including the war on our privacy here at home, and the growing national police state that we were creating. That was the first time I was ever tear gassed by my government. When I was out protesting to bring troops home, that's when the tear gas started flying at peaceful protesters when I was a teenager. But that's where I got my start, because I did not know about the Libertarian Party. Reflexively, because George W. Bush was the Republican who started the war, I became a Democrat. Now, I'm a good old boy from the South, so I'm a gun-loving Democrat, and I'm a Democrat who doesn't like to pay high taxes. In fact, I was a fair tax Democrat, and it got me a lot of weird looks in the room, but that's what I was. And so I organized within that party, and in 2007 we had a primary on, and we had Hillary Clinton, who we all knew was going to be a continuation of the warmongering policies that we already knew, and we had this new guy on the scene, Barack Obama, who was saying things that we all like to hear. I'm going to talk to our enemies without precondition, because we should be talking to people instead of fighting with them. I'm going to end the drone war. I'm going to close Guantanamo. I'm going to end the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Every single thing that he promised, he broke those promises. I fought really hard to get the guy elected. And so when he broke all those promises and got a Nobel Peace Prize on top of it, I left the Democratic Party. I said I cannot be a part of this party anymore. I can't be here worshiping Barack Obama. It was crazy to me that the people who were just marching behind me against George W. Bush were not getting ready to march behind me to fight against the Barack Obama war machine. So I left the Democratic Party. I was politically homeless for about a year and a half. And I was at the Gay Pride Festival in Atlanta in 2010, just enjoying my day, having a drink in my hand, and I see a tent for the Libertarian Party of Georgia. I'm trying to read what it says, and there's a man there waving me over. Come on, I see you looking at my sign, come on over here. That man was John Mons. He was running for governor in 2010. And he tried to get me to take the world's smallest political quiz. I was like, I don't got time for that. Well, he goes, well, tell me your biggest issue, and I bet the Libertarians are on your side. I'm going to bet you on this. And I said, and this is a quote I'll never forget, I said, I oppose the war in Iraq and the war on terror with every fiber of my being. And he said, welcome home. Welcome home to the Libertarian Party. This is your home now. We are the anti-war party. He did not say, well, have you read some Mises or Rothbard or Hayek? No. He welcomed me into the party. He said, sit down, hang out with us libertarians. You'll get more libertarian as you go along. And that's exactly what happened to me. It transformed me. And I'll tell you what made me earn his vote. Because he said, I'm here at the Atlanta Pride Festival. Where are my opponents for governor? The Republican candidate is not here because he actively campaigns against your community and uses you as a wedge politic to drive his voters to the polls. Not because he's lowering taxes or providing limited government. Because out of hatred for your community. The Democrat is not here. Now this was 2010. Their party will pay you lip service, but their candidate for governor is not here because he knows if he's taking pictures in front of rainbow flags, he'll lose suburban voters in the outer county. So really, how much does he really represent your community? He said, I'm here on principle. I'm a libertarian. I support your right to live your life as you see fit if you're not hurting anybody, and that includes who you love and how you express yourself. And I don't care if I gain or lose one vote, I'm standing here on principle. And that's what earned my first libertarian vote. And I grew in the movement. Throughout 2012, Gary was my first vote for president. I became a formal member of the Libertarian Party. I became an active member of the Libertarian Party of Georgia, being a member of my state's XCOM. I became an affiliate chair and vice chair. And in 2020, John Lewis passed away. He was a congressman in Georgia. He was a civil rights icon. I don't have to agree with all of his politics to say it's pretty badass that he got up and started to march for voting rights in Selma and took a police baton to the skull, which is something that none of us have ever had to sacrifice for liberty here. And let's be happy that we don't. And so I can disagree with his politics, but I really thought, you know, with his passing, we need to have a voice for liberty in the race to succeed. And I was that voice. I got to run for Congress in 2020 in a breakneck 10-week special election during the summer of COVID and George Floyd. It was very hard to door knock. In fact, I was sprayed with Lysol when I knocked on a door in the summer of 2020. And so I decided I was going to have a guerrilla campaign and just kind of campaign in the parks and along the walking trails, and that's what I did. And I did over 24 forums via Zoom. But I got a lot of people in Atlanta to hear the word libertarian for the first time and to hear ideas around criminal justice reform in a way they had never heard. So much so that on Zoom we're like the Brady Bunch. There's like 9 panes, all the candidates and the moderators. That when I'm talking about criminal justice reform, many times you would see the other candidates all nodding their head, not realizing because they're, you know, it's the first time everybody was on Zoom for the first time. They're not realizing, yeah, I'm being seen the entire time nodding along with this guy. And that's the kind of campaign I ran, was focused solely on criminal justice reform because that's what people were out in the streets for in that summer. That's the second time I've been tear gassed by my government. Is when I was out protesting peacefully for police accountability, to end qualified immunity, to have police hold liability insurance, to fight against a growing police state. And for that, the state of Georgia called the National Guard and had armored vehicles rolling down the streets. They were pulling people out of their cars and tasing them because they got lost. I saw that on video. Now those cops were fired because it was on video. If there hadn't been a news camera there, that would have never gotten them fired. And so I'm passionate about justice reform, as he mentioned, because I've lived through the struggle for it, and I see the consequences of it. I live in the city of Atlanta. There's a militarized police company or a group called Cop City. They're trying to build this giant police facility, including a mock block neighborhood, so they can learn how to lock us down door by door for the next pandemic. And so we oppose those things at the ground level in Atlanta. Getting on a bit of a tangent here, but that is what got me into this. And in 2022, I had, so far, the greatest honor of my political life, getting to be the U.S. Senate candidate in the state of Georgia. Now, I know somebody said, don't debate. You're right, don't debate people you're trying to convert. Save that when you're a candidate and you get on stage with a duopoly, because that's exactly what I did. I got on stage with a sitting U.S. Senator, and I held him accountable for the fact that he never reads the bills that he votes for, that he's voting the future of our kids and grandkids down the toilet by adding to the debt. And I got to hold him accountable. That's why it was the greatest honor of my life, because I got to put the concepts of liberty out front and center in an energetic way, opposing 2 very terrible candidates that the duopoly had put up. And because of that, I got to force a runoff in the state of Georgia. I got to pause the duopoly for 4 weeks and make them think about how pathetic they are that they have to go back and re-vote again. I cost the state of Georgia, unfortunately, $70 million to redo the election. But in the process, I told them how they can save $70 million the next time. Give us ranked choice voting in the state of Georgia, and if you don't, runoffs will continue until liberty improves. And so that's the kind of candidate for president I want to be. Where are we at in this moment in time, both as a party and as a country? We're a country that's $33 trillion in debt, 34 before we know it, and growing. We're a country that is constantly, our leaders, asking us to go to war overseas, asking us to fight, fights that we don't need to be in. We have constant division and partisan, hyper-partisan polarization in this country. We're demonizing one another. And so I think what we need for the Libertarian Party is a stark contrast that's going to break through that. I am not just going to be merely anti-Biden or anti-Trump. I'm going to be pro the ideas of liberty and how those things can help the individual, the individual voter. First and foremost, we have to talk about the biggest concern of every voter, the economy. They see inflation being run away in this country. It's reducing their ability to have a cost of living. It's making rent go up, food go up. Life is more expensive. And why is that? It's because we have a two-party system in this country that continues to print money out of thin air, to devalue our dollar, to pay for spending a day that's going to be paid for by this little guy right here, and probably his kids too. And so we have to have a president who wants to talk about getting spending under control, because that's how you get inflation under control. And we have to work our way towards either having something backing the dollar again, something finite that we can back that to. We have to get ourselves back to that. Or decentralize money altogether and remove government from it via Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency that takes government out of it altogether. That's a long path to get there. But if we don't start having the conversation, we'll never get there. We'll have an economic collapse far before we ever get where we need to be. The other issues that are near and dear to my heart, as I said, criminal justice reform. We need to end qualified immunity. We need to have all officers, all law enforcement officers across the country hold liability insurance policies. And here's why. Because when they do wrong, and we end qualified immunity, that judgment should not come out of the city services for other things, or the state budget, or the treasury. It should come out of their insurance policy. Because if you do wrong enough, you become uninsurable. You won't get an insurance policy anymore. It's a market policy that gets bad cops off the streets. There's no biases, there's no politicization around it. You're just a terrible cop, you've done a bad job, you can't be on the force anymore because you're too much of a liability. That's a great way to get bad cops off the force, using free market principles, something that's right in line with libertarianism. If you're going to be an agent of the state, you should have to hold an insurance policy to do that. Immigration is another thing that is near and dear to my heart. I was talking about John Lewis earlier. I attended a march in 2017 because ICE was housing immigration detainees in the Atlanta City Jail, and we didn't like that. So as we're ready to march, we're in front of the jail, we're all organizing together. One of the organizers says, "Look up, see out the windows, they see you." There's these little windows in the Atlanta City Jail. What do we see? We see hands and handkerchiefs of the immigrant prisoners who are waving at us, letting us know that they see us fighting for them. And we march there. John Lewis ends up speaking. We're at the Martin Luther King courthouse. And he gives his usual speech about good trouble, necessary trouble, fighting the government, and sometimes having to pay the price. Sometimes you got to get arrested, throwing a monkey wrench into the gears. But then he said, "Where are we at right now? You guys are in the middle of the street. Now behind you is a federal building named after a segregationist, a person who literally believed that the color of your skin should determine where you are in a place in society. And behind me is the Martin Luther King courthouse, a champion of liberty who believed that you should be judged by the content of your character, not the color of your skin." So when we think about how we treat immigrants in this country, what side of the street do we want to stand on? We want to stand on the side for liberty. And so we need to have a compassionate immigration system, an Ellis Island style immigration system, because 99% of the people who want to come here as immigrants want to come here to work. They want to do labor. They want to provide for their families, just like our ancestors did. So let's let them do it. Come through a port of entry. If you're not sick, like severely, like smallpox style, going to kill everybody, and you're not wanted for a crime that requires us to exercise our extradition treaties because we want those other nations to give us our people back if they try to escape, right? For rape or murder or some other terrible crime. If either of those things aren't being violated, come on in, come work. And in fact, if we did that, we'd have a lot more seasonal labor. Because right now we have people who come here, they stay here because they don't want to go back because it's really hard to get here. And so they stay. Well, if we had an open immigration system, they'd be able to go back, take their money back to their families, and prosper. It also has to deal with the 10 million, or well, really closer to 20 million probably, people who are here without documentation. Those people live in the shadows. As bad as we have it from government, they have it worse. Because they can't even access government when they need help. How many immigrant children have probably been abused by a priest, or a scoutmaster, or a family member, or a teacher, and they can't go to an authority figure because they know that their mom and dad are here illegally and they might get deported? How many immigrant wives are possibly being abused, and they can't go seek help or go to a shelter for their kids because they know if they're found out, they'll get deported? This is the kind of victims that putting people in the shadows creates, and in addition to labor exploitation and other things. So when we treat immigrants with compassion and create a system that works for them, we also allow law enforcement to actually focus on the real crimes of human exploitation at the border, human trafficking that does happen. We got to put our eye on that ball, not on the 99%, 99.9% of people who just come here to do good. And if we do that, we can actually crack down on real crimes of human exploitation that happen at our border. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about foreign policy. It is a very important thing right now because we have two major foreign policy conflicts going around the world, and it's important for the Libertarian candidate to be pretty frank with what we need to be doing here. I do not support the United States sending arms to Ukraine or supporting Israel in this effort, and it's not for lack of empathy. In fact, I think the most empathic position the United States can take right now is the humanitarian position, because it certainly isn't a militaristic position. Certainly not in the Middle East. I think the last 22 years have shown us that a heavy hand with the Middle East, with the United States, is not a way to bring about peace and prosperity in the region. It's a way to destabilize the region. But what do we do with regards to Ukraine and this stuff going on? With Ukraine, my policy, if I were president, would be simple. We will no longer be funding the military solution there. Europe can do that if they want to. They're the ones most directly threatened on their doorstep. We are going to heavily fund the humanitarian effort. And by that I mean any person in Ukraine who wants to get out of the war zone, who wants to get away from between two governments fighting a war, should be able to come here as a refugee. Let them stay here until the conflict is over. Afterwards, we can decide whether they want to stay here or go back home. Make the same offer to any member of the Russian military who's currently fighting in Ukraine. If you've crossed in the boundaries of Ukraine, go AWOL. Leave the military. You don't have to freeze or die in Ukraine. Come here with asylum. You know what that will do? Demoralize the Russian military and get them back across to their border and hopefully have both sides suing for peace. Without firing a single shot, we can provide real humanitarian aid. With regards to Israel, and I want to be very clear here, the first thing that I did when I heard about what happened in Israel is I said a prayer for all of the victims. You know, we're seeing that over 1,000 dead in Israel, many thousands more injured. I think the death toll right now in Gaza, the last time I checked, was like nearing 1,000 and many more. It's over 1,000 now. So I say a prayer for all the victims. I feel for this. There's no cut and dry, this person's good and this person's bad, other than to say that the Hamas folks who went into the Israeli neighborhoods and committed acts of barbarism, they did horrible, horrible violations. And frankly, if that kind of violence were to happen in the United States, I don't think any of us would not expect the United States to try to quell that violence, which is exactly what Israel is doing there. But I don't support airstrikes in Gaza. Here's why. It's one of the most population-dense areas in the world. Half of the population is under the age of 18. They're children. That's 1 million children. And I hear the excuse of, well, they warned them before they airstrike the buildings, they could get out. Well, let me ask you how you would feel if your warning was a small bomb that dropped on the roof of your building to let you know that the big bomb is coming in half an hour. And you have half an hour to get out of a building with no power, because they've cut the electricity, with your children, and whatever you can carry with you. And then 30 minutes later, you see where you were just living raised to the ground. That is not a solution that's going to bring about peace. It's just not. And we have to examine objectively what motivated this violence. It does not justify the violence. We have to look at the conditions that this violence came from, namely in Gaza, where conditions are desperate for people. And out of desperation, sometimes the worst violence bubbles to the surface. That's what we've seen on our television screens and on social media the last few days, is the worst kind of violence that comes from this. The only way I believe that there's going to be peace in the region is for the two groups, the Israelis and Palestinians, to come together to form a two-state solution. Who does not need to be involved in that is the United States. We cannot force that meeting. We cannot set those terms. Because frankly, we have heavily invested militarily into Israel, and any of us trying to set terms or whatever those meetings will be seen by the Palestinians as not being in good faith. They have to come into good faith to each other. We cannot force this meeting. So all of you, if you are people of faith, I ask that you pray for the victims in Gaza and in Israel. It's something that no family should have to go through. No family should have to hear about their child being killed at a music festival because they were just there to listen to music. And nobody should have to hear about their homes being completely destroyed to an Israeli airstrike when they were completely innocent. It's tragic. The only thing that will make it more tragic is if the United States puts a thumb on the scale or puts its boot on the ground. And so as a candidate for president, my policy is to oppose this. And again, to support humanitarian efforts. We should allow people of Gaza to come here as refugees. They're in an open-air prison right now, essentially. we should allow them to come here if they want to. And we should allow the same for anybody who is wanting to get out of the war zone right now. As the war goes on, let them come here as refugees. We are a shining beacon of liberty, or at least we should be. And that's the way we can have a foreign policy that treats people with humanity, but also does not exacerbate the conflict with our military. We need to start thinking about a foreign policy that's done through free markets, free trade, and diplomacy with one another. We cannot export our values to the barrel of a gun. I'll tell you right now, we will get more freedom in the world by exporting Burger King than bombs. Capitalism, free market trade. It's what liberalized East Germany. When the wall came down, you saw capitalism flood into the region, and the quality of life immediately improved. We need to be focusing on markets, not bombs, and not militaries. I want to say this, lastly, as I kind of conclude what I'm talking about. I believe that we need a candidate who's going to provide a real contrast to Biden and Trump. I will be 39 years old on election day. I am half Donald Trump's age and less than half of Joe Biden's age. I still have all my faculties with me. Mentally, I'm all there. Don't do the McConnell freeze. I'm going to be a good contrast, especially if you can get me on the debate stage. Because let me tell you, there's nothing more that I would like to do than get on a debate stage with Donald Trump and Joe Biden, hold them accountable for the fact that they've put so much of our future on the credit card of national debt. And they've put so many people in danger around the world with reckless foreign policy, and put so many lives into misery with their terrible domestic policy. I want to be that alternative. And I want to talk about not just what the government's going to do, but what we replace the government with when we get rid of it. Activists on the ground, providing direct action. Because real change in this country begins at the grassroots. Somebody talked about victory earlier. We can't be, in fantasy land about what victory means. So we gotta lose sometimes, but still talk about it. I actually talk about different kinds of victory. Now there's the outright victory of a Libertarian candidate winning the presidency in 2024. That's very slight, very remote. There's a multiverse where that exists. Not sure that's the one we're living in right now, but who knows? But let's talk about the other real, concrete victories an energetic, passionate Libertarian candidacy for president can provide all over the country. First and foremost is ballot access. I'm from Georgia. We have one race statewide in 2024, and that's president and vice president. If we don't hit 1.5%, there's no other candidate for Senate forcing runoff or governor. We don't have the next Chase Oliver or Shane Hazel on our ballot. So I want to fight to secure ballot access in my state. And in all the states that I can secure ballot access, every state that I secure that, that's a win. That's a victory for the Libertarian Party. Major party status, like they have in Iowa. They earned it in 2022 with a great candidate for governor who traveled to every county in Iowa, kind of doing what I'm doing as I'm traveling to every state in the country. And because of that, and the fact that I campaigned in Iowa and got a little bit of media while I did it, allowed me to be the first candidate for president ever who's not a Republican or a Democrat to speak at the Iowa State Fair at the Des Moines Register soapbox. I got to break that glass ceiling for the Libertarian Party. So I want to secure major party status in Iowa and in any other state that we can do it, because that's a real Libertarian win for the party. And that's a real gut check to the duopoly. That's the building blocks we need. Lastly, the greatest metric of victory for me will be how many local Libertarians do we get elected to office all over the country, and how can I support them at the local level. I was door knocking for Dustin Dana out in Delaware, Ohio, yesterday. I dropped a couple hundred pieces of lid on houses. That's an easy thing I can do. But really, if I'm our candidate for president, I'm going to be out there supporting both Libertarian candidates at every level of the ballot, all over the country, and making sure that whatever media I'm getting, whatever rallies I'm able to hold and get an audience, we're going to have local candidates that are speaking to them too, because we're going to activate them. And lastly, I want to say my job does not end on election day if I'm your nominee. It really actually starts the day after election day, because I will have millions of voters, thousands of new volunteers and members, and my job is to get on the phone, get on the computer, and make sure each of them is activated at their local Libertarian affiliate. And if there's not an affiliate where they are, by God, they are going to be the Libertarian affiliate in that county or in that state. We're going to make sure that we do not lose the connection that we have in this presidential election, because it's something we fail at every 4 years. No offense to Joe, she had to go back to teaching. No offense to Gary, it wasn't really his thing doing that. It will be my thing. And I want to say a little bit about this. You guys have seen this right here. I'm already branded. I got my logo. We're not waiting 4 months to get a logo. We're going to be professionally ready to roll the day we win the nomination. All right? And all of you have my card here right now. First, you got my number and my email. If you see me traveling around and you need to give some feedback, whether it be good or bad or whatever, let us know. If there's an event going on around here that you think you need to have a voice for in the presidential campaign, let us know. We'll get me out there. I've been to 33 states so far. By the end of this thing, I'll be to 44 states by the end of the year. By convention, I will visit all 50 states because I think it's important for the delegates to know that their candidate for president has the energy and enthusiasm to reach out to libertarians and voters in every state of the union. And that's the promise I make to you. If you like what you've heard today, if you want to get involved, if you want to join this team, because God knows I want to win the state of Kentucky and in the state of Ohio, which is right around the way, I want to bring a full delegation of all of our delegates from both states. Text Chase to 21,000. It's right here on the card. If you do that, it'll get you right where you can sign up as a volunteer, say that you're interested in being a delegate, or if you're able to support as a donor supporter, please do it. That's what allows me to travel around all over the country speaking to libertarians and non-libertarians about a message that is different than what the two-party system is going to provide them. We're going to provide them a positive, aspirational message that's rooted in libertarian principles. We don't have to say libertarian all the time. We have to say, how is this going to help your family and your community and take power out of the hands of those in Washington, D.C. because, to be frank, they don't know you, they don't know your family, they don't know your community. To you, to the bureaucrat, you are just a number on a spreadsheet. You are a statistic. I want to take power out of their hands and put it back in our hands so that we can control our destiny. We can control our future. We can control the choices that our children make with regards to education or healthcare or anything else. Because God knows that our parents out there have unconditional love for their kids and they're going to be the best advocate that they can be. So let's take power out of the hands of government and put it back in our hands, and let's free up the world in our lifetime. This 2024 campaign is the first step in that direction. And I know there have been times when we feel like it's hopeless. The debt keeps growing, the wars keep going, and even internally, the party's not whatever, right? Well, I tell you this, it's darkest before the dawn. The dawn is coming in 2024. Join me and let's bring liberty to the United States of America to this election. Thank you very much.